Today we're learning how to make these self-closing, Viking-inspired bags. Stay tuned. Greetings adventurers and welcome to Skill Tree, where we learn how to do just about everything. So recently we went to the Brandywine Festival. You can check that out right here, where we got to be hobbits for a few days in the Shire. It was super fun. But while I was there, I actually noticed a particular style of bag was around a lot. Specifically, this kind of bag right here, and I love them. I thought they were the coolest thing. And it turns out they're modeled after actual archaeological finds on how they would have built bags like this. Specifically ones found in what I think is called Hythabu and Birka, I think. I'll leave an article down below. Anyways, one of the cool things about this bag is that wooden top. The way the rope goes through it is so whenever you put weight on it, it automatically makes the top close. So you don't need any kind of latch or anything. The weight of the bag keeps itself closed. And I love that. So that is what we are making today. We are going to make our own version of this type of bag. But we're going to make it with our own flair. We're going to make it our own. I'm excited about it. All right, so I'm going to make this thing out of leather because I love working with leather. And I decided that I wanted to tool an image in the front. Something that would go well with the camp we run at Conquest. You can check that out right here if you're interested. But yeah, I was thinking like a tree motif on top of like a book or something. So in order to make that design first, I took a piece of paper and I folded it in half. This is just going to make it so I only have to draw one half of a design and I can make it perfectly symmetrical. Basically, I just draw along that fold one half of my image. Then once I'm pleased with how that looks, I take that folded piece of paper and I put it on top of this carbon paper here. Then I simply retrace my design. Now when I open it up, it is perfectly mirrored on the other side. It has to be one of my favorite tricks to make symmetry. It's like stupid easy, and it doesn't matter what you draw because it's going to be exactly mirrored on the other side, so it'll look pretty much perfect. Now, this is the design we're going to use to tool onto leather, but that leaves me with a bit of a problem because it is paper, and in order to tool something on leather, you have to wet or case the leather first. Though I think casing it is very specific if you wet it and then you leave it kind of moist in a bag overnight or something like that. I think it's specific. Anywho, we're going to be wetting the leather and I don't want to just have the paper deteriorate. So in order to stop this, I actually just put this sticky plastic on the back here. This is transfer tape. It's the stuff usually used if you cut things out on a Cricut printer or something. You want it all to stay together. But it makes an effective water barrier so my stuff doesn't just fall apart. Now, if you don't have this stuff, no worries. You can just use saran wrap or whatever. Just make sure you tape it into place so it doesn't dance around on you. All right, so with that protected, I went ahead and wet down this 4-ounce piece of veg tan leather. You'll want to use veg tan leather because you can't stamp chrome tan leather. It's really the only choice you have. And I chose 4-ounce because it's thick enough to kind of hold its shape, but it's also pliable enough that it'll open easily and it won't fight me too much. All I do is simply lay my drawing into place, and then I retrace over it with a pen. I found tracing over it again with a pen works great because then I can see where I've been. I can't tell you how many times I'd be drawing it out with a pencil and I'd forget what I've already covered or what I haven't. And then once I'm sure everything has been redrawn, I uncover it and bam, it's on my leather. Also, you're going to notice I redraw this thing so many times during this. I drew it the first time, and then I have to trace over it again, then I trace over it again, and now to make it stay in the leather, I go back in with my swivel knife and trace over it again. And by the way, if you're brand new to leather, in order to make an image stay on leather, you actually have to cut it in after you've kind of traced it on. And to do that, we're using a swivel knife, which is a knife on a swivel. Pretty self-explanatory. But here's the cool part, because after that has been cut in, I go back in with a stamp that's called a bevel stamp and just knock one edge of that cut down. That's going to add depth and make everything else seem like it's popping out, so this becomes like a 3D image on the leather. Then to give it just that little, that extra pop, because I was feeling a little spicy, I decided to use my backgrounder tool, which just leaves all these little dots. It's kind of like a stippled picture if you were doing it with a pen or something. But the more of those little dots you lay down, the more it's going to look shaded. So I'd go into the darker areas and then I'd slowly bring it out, hitting it less hard and less amount of times to kind of add that gradient to it. And afterwards, I thought it was looking really good. In fact, I decided to add more just to that whole background circle area to really bring that tree to the forefront. Then I just used my round knife to cut this thing out the size that I want the bag to be. And copy that size again for the back panel. So now I have a front and a back. And those are the main components of the bag, right? That's the very front and the very back. And I love that we were able to do all of that with just some simple tools. Now there's just certain tools that I've always used for the channel. These punches and this swivel knife were actually featured in my very first episode, which you can check out here. Another thing though that's helped me since the very beginning is today's sponsor, Squarespace. Right when I decided to actually make Skilltree a business and start taking it seriously, Squarespace is where I turned to make my website. And back then the process was super easy, but now it's like crazy. With the design intelligence feature, you now have the help with AI to put everything together, which really takes a lot of that kind of guesswork out of the whole process. But even without that, there's a super large library of templates that you can use just to get you started and make the website exactly what you want it to be right out of the gate. Squarespace also makes it easy to add a bunch of different bells and whistles to it if you want the thing to be a shop, if you want an area to post your videos on. Really whatever messaging or type of service you're trying to get across with your business, Squarespace is a fantastic way to get that done. So if you're ready to start getting your message out there, just go to squarespace.com for a free trial. Then when you're ready to actually launch your website, just go to squarespace.com/skilltree and save 10% off of your first purchase of a website domain. We've trusted Squarespace with our website for years at this point, and there's really no sign of us turning that around. It's just too easy to use. So head to squarespace.com and start building your website today. All right, so back to it. I've decided to make this thing a light brown. So again, with the leather slightly moist, I just kind of spread my dye out as evenly as possible. Then once it's dry, I went back in with a clean paper towel just to get all that surface dye off. This is one of those things that I wish I had realized sooner when I first started leather crafting. When you dye something, there is a residue left off, almost like a powdery pigment that is left on top of the leather, that if you forget to wash that off, then as soon as you add like your top coat or whatever, that ends up being dyed and ends up coming out swirly or dyeing other things. It's a real pain in the ass. So yeah, just remember to wipe it down first. Once I was done doing that though, I actually hit that tree and book with some steel wool. This is just gonna lighten up that leather and help separate that tree a little bit more from everything else so it doesn't look so monochrome. Now we're gonna pop that out even further by adding an antique to this whole thing, but first we gotta put on some of this resist here. This just adds a protective coat over the leather and makes it so the whole thing doesn't get dyed darker when I add my antiquing to it. Then once that dries, I add the antiquing gel, making sure to get it all into the little crannies and nooks and little shapes that I made. Then immediately wipe it away. What's gonna happen is it's going to stay in those lower points. So everywhere I put the backgrounder tool and everywhere I made little grooves and stuff, that dye will stay in there, causing it to set further into the background while everything else looks even more in the foreground. You'll notice too that I'm doing this in sections. It will start to dye your piece if you leave it on for too long. So I like to do little sections, like I have a ticking clock in my head on how long it takes, and then I start cleaning it off. As long as you do it quick enough, there isn't really a time where it overlaps enough to show like a darker stripe where the two layers have touched each other or whatever. At least it hasn't for me yet. All right, cool. So I want this bag to be lined. I want it to have like a fabric lining inside. So in order to do that, I just kind of laid it on top of some fabric that I had here and cut out the fabric just a little bit larger than the panel. Of course, doing this for both the front and the back. Now I'm going to glue these on, but I had an idea before we started doing this. I wanted to make this bag a little bit more interesting or useful for myself, and I thought a cool way to do this is to make it so that it could either be like a shoulder bag or a backpack, a little Viking backpack. I dig it. So in order to do this, I actually just cut these little strips of leather here that will neatly wrap around these D-rings. And then I just attach those to the back bottom of the bag with some rivets. Now you have a place to like hang stuff if you want to, but also a place to attach rope so that you can like wear it like a backpack, I think. We'll see how it works. No matter what, it's a place you can hang stuff at least. With that good, I just hit the back of both pieces with this barge cement here, and then did the same with the fabric, trying to keep it as light as possible so it didn't bleed to the front too much. But I'm gonna be honest, it always bleeds to the front for me a little bit. I don't know if it's just the thinness of the fabric I use, but every time I've used like one of the 3M spray adhesives or something, I never have good luck with that staying either. But I did figure out a really cool trick to get your pieces in place, because when you're using contact adhesive, if it's, tacky and stuff and it touches each other, that is it. That is where it is staying forever now, unless you want to like damage the piece and rip things apart. So when you have big floppy things like pieces of fabric, while you're trying to put it on, it's really hard to stop it from touching itself like duct tape does, or touching the piece where you don't want it to. But I learned if you actually take some baking paper and put it down first, the glue will not stick to that. Then you can position the other half exactly where you want it, and slowly slide out that baking paper as you smooth the piece down. This is a lifesaver for me. I can't tell you how many times I was fighting with like large pieces and stuff. Had I known you can just lay a piece of baking paper down. Oh, would have saved a lot of time and a lot of messed up projects. That's a good little tip right there. Anywho, since I left that fabric a little bit large, we can actually just go back through and cut it exact. So now we have these panels that are nicely lined with fabric, and everything is just kind of perfectly in shape where we want it. Okay, so that gives us like the front and back panels of the bag. The next kind of biggest feature of this bag are those pieces that were actually found in the archaeological digs, right? Like the wooden or bone pieces that go on the top, which is of course also where the magic happens. Those are where you tug on the rope and it closes together, right? So I want to make those and make them cool if I can. So I just use the same exact trick. I have a folded up piece of paper here, and then I use this little French curve to give myself the end designs so they'll have kind of like a horn thing going on. Then drew an image and used my carbon paper to make it perfect. Now the wood I will be using for this piece are these 1/4 inch pieces of oak here. I think the height I end up going for on these things are around 3 inches. I didn't really measure it out too much, just whatever looked really cool, to be honest with you. Anywho, to get my design onto the wood, I just, again, used my carbon paper and traced everything out right onto the board. Then I used some double-sided tape so that I could actually stick the 2 pieces of board together. This way I only have to cut the shape out once, and it's gonna be like matching exactly, because I want them to close up and match exactly, so I'd like them to be perfect. To make that happen, all I did was clamp it to the table and then use my coping saw to just go around the outside of this thing. Then once all the excess wood was removed, I went back in and sanded off all the edges and made sure it was perfect. I even took this opportunity to drill out the little end holes there where the rope goes through because again, I want them to match up perfectly, so doing it while they're still together is gonna make it great. Just as a little extra though, I went back in with this kind of countersink here just to make those holes a lot smoother because I want the rope to be able to go into it without kind of biting on like the hard edge of wood. With that good, I took the 2 pieces apart and just started carving out that front piece that had that design on it. For this, I just used the Dremel and traced around my edge, and then went back in with a little drill bit and just simply drilled out a bunch of little dots. Basically, it's just stippling again. It's the same exact technique I used on the leather, just in larger scale. I thought it would kind of match well. And just like we did with the antiquing, I go back into that stippling with some black paint, make sure it gets all into the little grooves there, and then after it's dried, I just sand away the paint that's on the surface, leaving all that dark stuff behind. Then I add a seal to those pieces that I made out of beeswax and mineral oil just to help protect everything a little bit more. All right, cool. Now it's time to actually start constructing this bag. Now, a lot of the examples have like slits cut into them, so you can have leather pieces actually loop over them and attach to the bag that way. I didn't plan for that, and I'm far too lazy. So instead, I ended up just drilling holes out, spaced out 3 inches apart, making sure that the holes were big enough to accept the very bottom of a rivet cap, because I'm going to rivet it in place. Nice and easy. With those drilled out, I put this thing in place where it would go and used an awl to mark it onto the leather. Then used my punch to make my holes through the leather and the fabric. Then just to give it a little added hold, I added some contact adhesive right to the edge where the wood would cover and to the bottom of the wood where it would match up with the leather. Then it was pretty easy to just kind of stick these things together after it was cured, put my rapid rivets through the other side, and then hammer on the tops. And not only do I like the way that looks, it is not going anywhere. I'm very excited kind of how easy that was because it was a miss on my part not to think of how I'd attach the two. It was kind of dumb, to be honest with you. Anyways, the last thing we really need to do with this is add the gussets to the side and bottom of the bag so that, you know, it can be a bag. Right now it's just like loose panels. You get what I'm saying. Just being awkward on camera. Anyways, to do this, I decided to use this cool looking chrome tan leather that I had, cut to 5-inch wide strips. I also cut it just long enough so it's about 1/8 of an inch hanging over on each side at the bottom, and so it kind of falls short of the top here. Basically, I want that gusset to fall short of the top because I want those tops to come together as cleanly as possible, and I'm afraid that if I bring the leather all the way up to that top, it's gonna get in the way of it sealing. And of course, I brought it a little bit further out on the bottom because that gives me some seam allowance where I can sew things up. To sew them up, by the way, I started by sewing the bottoms and the sides together, just by putting the insides facing each other and running my thread along the bottoms there. I also made sure that that extra 1/8 of an inch was not sewn, so that I had this little material here to spread out and actually sew to the bag itself. This way it just doesn't fight me. If it was sewn together, I'd have to try to fold that open and it would bother me the whole time. Now with that figured out, I just lined up the inside of the bag with the inside of my gusset and simply sewed all along those edges. That leaves me with this, what is clearly half of a bag. Or 3/4 of a bag, I think would be more accurate. Anyways, yeah, that's how it's going together. Now, you may be asking yourself, why did I sew them that way so they're all facing out rather than like trying to butt the seam in and make it look a little bit more clean? That was actually by design, because by doing it that way, we're laying the leather against itself, which is going to encourage it to bend inside rather than outwards. So basically when that thing closes, I want the leather gussets on the sides to want to bend in rather than flare out and have these big openings on the side. My last like 2 bags, I did it the other way because I like the way the seams look when they're hidden that way, but man, I hate the way that flares out. So this is my solution. Anywho, to put the front panel on, I just did exactly the same thing by sewing all around the edges. And boom, baby, that right there, that's a bag. You can put stuff in it, it looks awesome, it folds like flat down. I really like that those gussets, they do fold inward. Very happy about that. But to get the full effect, I just add some rope through those holes there and tie them off into a knot. Now, as you can see, the weight of the bag actually keeps it closed. But it's really simple to just kind of pull the bag open, get what you need, and then simply push it back down and it closes itself, which is awesome. I think that's super cool. And the seal's actually really good. Like, it closes itself pretty tight. I bet, in fact, if you put an actual seal on it, like if you lined the insides of that with maybe some chrome tan or something, then when it squeezes together, it could even make kind of like a rain-tight seal, I bet. I love that. That's so cool. But remember, we had put these little D-rings down here in the bottom. So by making the loop that you put over your shoulder something you can untie and then tie them to those D-rings, bam, baby, it's a backpack. I made it into a little Viking backpack. How cool is that? Which is mint. I like having those options when I'm toting a bag around all day. Like sometimes it gets tired wearing it one way. You can put it on. I'm going to change these ropes out because this is the scratchiest rope on earth, but it's the only rope I had right now. But I think that is pretty cool right there. And it's super cool that this is a design that was legitimately used. Maybe not the backpack, I can't say. But yeah, this design here, it was a clever design that was used by people way back when, and I think that's really, really cool. I'm also quite proud of how my tree and book came out. I think that came out real nice. Anywho, I hope you enjoyed this project too and you give it a shot. It's a really fun, very easy one to do. And you can do it out of anything. If you want to do it out of fabric instead of leather, like that's a much more cost-effective and easier material to use, just kind of make it your own. It's awesome. Now, hopefully you liked this project. If you did, why don't you give me some of that like it love, and don't forget to subscribe so you know when I release new content. Also, if you have any cool ideas of bags like this or what you'd even do differently on this one here, why don't you leave that down in the comment section. I love hearing your tips and tricks. In the meantime though, keep leveling up, you. You made it to the end screen. YouTube loves it when you do that. It's a fantastic way to support this channel. Another fantastic way to support this channel is by joining these people's noble ranks. These are our Patreon members, and we cannot do any of this without them. Giant shout out to our newest high tier Patreon member, Richard Smiley and Gary. And a huge shout out to our Grandmaster tier Patreons, Dragon Designs, Froggy, and WildFox99. It means everything to us that you guys support us. It's crazy and humbling and amazing, and we have some really cool stuff on the horizon for you. I'm very, very excited about, so hang in tight there. We appreciate you. If you like what we do here and want to support us, consider joining our Patreon, link in the description below. Otherwise, you can check out one of these videos that YouTube thinks you'd like, and that helps out a lot too. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm going to make a smaller bag that matches this much bigger bag, a little pouch version. I think you're super cute.